Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Furlong, and today we're talking about continuing evolution. We know that population of organisms will always be evolving. So what are some examples of this continuing evolution? Well, of course, we know that genomic changes over time does lead to evolution. So for instance, we talked about the rock pocket mice, and we can see how a change in their genome caused there to be a darker variety from the lighter colored variety, or the stickleback fish, where the freshwater stickleback fish lost their pelvis compared to the marine stickleback fish. So changes in those genes we know can lead to new phenotypes, which could potentially lead to new species. We see this continuous evolution in changes in the fossil record. So for instance, we look at the evolution of the horse. We can see that change from these ancient Mesohippus types of horses to the modern horse that we have today. And we can track those changes. Another example of this is looking at human evolution, where we see some of these ancient species that have similar characteristics and how those characteristics have changed to the type of organisms that we are today. So fossils can show how these species have changed over time. Now, in these examples, it takes a long time for us to see evolution at work, but there's actually some much faster versions of evolution. Let's take a look at those. One is the evolution of resistance to antibiotics, pesticides, herbicides, or even chemotherapy drugs. So we're going to focus on antibiotics. Bacteria can go through so many generations very quickly. Mutations arise, and given the environment that they're in, they may become resistant to some of the antibiotics that we have. Here we see a very large agar plate. This was done at Harvard University. And in this agar plate, they made different areas with different concentrations of antibiotics. So in the end zones, if you will, there was no antibiotics. Then they put in a few antibiotics that would kill most bacteria. Then they added 10 times that amount, 100 times that amount, and finally 1,000 times that amount. They inoculated the ends with bacteria that we can see looks like they're kind of glowing white here. And then all of a sudden a mutant appears. Like, I can now live in an area that has more antibiotics. I'm now resistant to that level. And then as they reach to the next level where there's 10 times that amount, they realize it kind of stops us temporarily, but then mutants appear. And eventually, these bacteria were able to live in the areas that had 1,000 times the normal amount of antibiotics that would kill bacteria. They have become resistant to those bacteria. So over time, bacteria becomes resistant to the antibiotics. And this is why we always need to find new antibiotics. Because once the antibiotic doesn't work anymore, it's not going to help us when we get sick. Let's take a look at another example, this time with pesticides. We may use pesticides to kill off insects, maybe in our flower beds or in farm fields. But these insects, and most of the insects will die from that pesticide, but not all of them do. And so some of these are becoming resistant to the pesticides. So we spray again, it kills off a majority of them, but some of the insects still survives. Over time, you're going to have a bunch of insects that are resistant to those pesticides. So some individuals survive that pesticide spraying, and after numerous sprays, only the resistant individuals persist, which means then you're going to have to come up with new pesticides. The same thing is true with herbicides. When we're trying to kill weeds, weeds can become resistant to some of the herbicides that we use, so we have to constantly be changing up what herbicides we're using. Another example of fast evolution are pathogens. Pathogens evolve and cause emergent diseases. Now, a pathogen is a disease-causing agent. Now, the one that comes to mind more readily than others is COVID-19. This was first identified in 2019, led to the pandemic of 2020, where this virus kept on mutating, and we can see here just in the first few months how many times it mutated. In 2021, it started mutating into a more serious form, the Delta variant and the Lambda variant. And it all started from what we think may have been a virus that infected bats that mutated to infect humans. So in the span of about 2 years, we can see the evolution of this virus. happening very fast. And as it continues to mutate, it's going to lead to even more new and dangerous variants. Is it going to ever mutate so that it can't infect humans? Probably not. It's not how evolution works. So evolution is still happening in all populations. And as long as we continue living in the environment, it's not going to stop. I'll see you in class.